Professor David Stuckler here. This is this week's FastTrack live workshop. Your opportunity to ask all those questions you were afraid of asking and get real, simple, no nonsense, straightforward answers. We've got two excellent video questions that we're going to cover. I've also got a mini training for you on one of the topics that a lot of our students have been struggling with, which is finding the right research design. When you're doing research for the first time, it can be bewildering. You might not know, feel like you have your feet. Take a step forward, take a step backwards. I'm going to give you our guide to figuring out what the right design is for you to help you get to where you want to go. And as ever, we've got a lot of comments and questions that take place in our group chats in our Facebook group. If you have not joined our Facebook group, that is the best chance to tap the knowledge of our community and get in direct touch with me in the DMs so that we can provide you with free and valuable support. We've also got over 60 hours of masterclasses on everything from productivity to reading to writing in a step-by-step systematic review mini course. You're not going to want to miss that. There's nothing else like that out there. And precisely, I created this community because I saw so many students in my time as a professor at Harvard, Oxford, and Cambridge. These were bright, talented students, but they were struggling. And it wasn't because they weren't capable. It wasn't because they weren't able. It wasn't even that they didn't have the right support at their fingertips. It was that they were not getting connected to the right kind of mentorship, consistent, steady feedback, and guidance they needed to truly thrive. And especially in our universities, there's so many things that you're just expected to figure out, whether that is writing or productivity. And we don't teach these informal and sometimes even softer skills. And so really with FastTrack, I've been wanting to close that gap and make available to you the things that really helped me that I didn't learn from classes, but I got passed on to me through mentors. And so my goal is to take that, what I learned myself in my journey in these elite institutions, democratize that and make it available for all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up a first question. Before I do the mini training, I'm going to go first through our two video questions. We have Divraj, who you may remember from some of our previous episodes, who sent a video question on his systematic review. He's come back with an update, so really excited for that. And Neha joining us for the first time. Here we are, Neha. I'm going to pull up your video and see.
Hello, Professor. This is Neha Tiwari from India.
Okay, hang on a second. I'm hoping you guys can all hear this. If not, if there's technical glitches, let me know in the chat. So Neha from India. Okay, let's keep going. Let me turn up her volume too. And I've got the chat open here. So do let me know in the chat, guys, if there's a technical glitch.
First question is, how can I wind up with my literature review? I have taken 4 variables. Independent variable is servant leadership. Dependent variable is employee performance.
Okay. I know there's some background noise here, Neha, but it sounds like your independent variable is servant leadership and your dependent variable is employee performance. So that's good. I like already that you have clarity on your outcome and what your kind of exposure or intervention, what you're looking at. So very clear to understand the causal logic. How does servant leadership affect employee performance? Really nice. Let's keep going.
I have also taken mediating and moderating variables. How do I wind up with these 4 variables? Literature review, number 1, and how I can simultaneously start with my research methodology. Please guide. Thank you.
Excellent. So that is a fantastic question. I think a lot of people might, who are watching right now, might be in a similar situation. It's like, well, I know I need to look at the relationship between this and that, in this case, servant leadership and employee performance. I've got to do a literature review and define my methodology. Well, you're in the right place. I'm going to help you with that. And to help you with that, I think it's really important for us to take first a sense of the stock of knowledge that's already out there. What research has already been done? And that's going to help you kind of position your research. And this fits really nicely with the conversation we're going to have today about finding your right research design for your research methodology. One point to note, you're in the right place with doing a literature review. Many of you who follow this channel know I am a fierce advocate of systematic literature reviews. Because you've got to do a literature review anyway, you might as well do this in a way that enables you to publish and get that first paper out under your belt. It's a great way to develop really good research habits and boost your confidence going forward. So I recommend now that you do a systematic literature review. And let me just take a quick stock take of the state of the field. So let's go do a quick look here at scope. And we can look here I think the best way to do this would be for us to go look in Google Scholar, actually. So let me share my screen. And hopefully this is going to work and you guys can see this. And here we go. Okay, great. And let's go over to Google Scholar and look at your topic. By the way, Facebook group, guys, if you haven't joined it, where have you been? Join us. We've got 6,000 students from all over the world taking advantage of our support, and it's the best place to ask questions. All right. So let's look here and just see what the state of play is on servant leadership and employee performance. And what I can already see here, look at these nice citations. This is you can see this is a really healthy field. Relatively recent papers doing great. Okay, so this is a well-developed field. Let's see what the state of play is on systematic reviews. And here we go. We can see systematic reviews have been performed. Here's some on network analysis. Here's one looking at for a model. Here's another looking at behavioral and effective outcomes. And here's one that is a literature review, but not a systematic review. And these are published in pretty good journals. These literature reviews, managerial issues, lots of citations. But here we go. The closest one that I'm seeing on quick glance is this one here, looking at employees' performance outcomes. But this was a literature review, and it looks like they may have followed a systematic model. This was already 4 years ago. So this becomes what we sometimes call your nearest neighbor paper, which is the paper closest to yours, and you need to use this in your literature review to identify the gap. That's something I'm going to talk about later, but the value out of your study, what you're adding over and above this paper. And so if you haven't already, you need to look at this one very closely. But what I'm seeing here on quick glance is there a scope for a systematic literature review. And I would set up that systematic literature review looking up your two parameters here, servant leadership and employee performance. And I'm going to share my screen one more time and create a whiteboard so we can map this so I can show you how kind of your mediating, moderating variables will fit in there. But that will be part of your review. So let me go back here just for a second, guys, and I'm going to pull up a whiteboard. And so I'm going to take this. I'm going to stop sharing this. I'm going to share a different screen. So let me stop screen sharing, and let's go ahead and share a whiteboard. Now, you're asking questions about your literature review, and I think your research methodology, and your ideal lit review is going to help you identify gaps in the field. So your literature review often takes this kind of a flow where it starts very broad and forms a funnel. So you're going to look at all the studies linking, say, servant leadership and employee performance. And by the end of your literature review, you should have a sense of what the gaps in the literature are, what hasn't been done but needs to be done, what's some of the low-hanging fruit, what might be, maybe you'll find studies haven't been done in India, and that's low-hanging fruit. Maybe you'll find that a lot of the studies are qualitative research designs and haven't been quantitative. Maybe you're going to find that they haven't really measured servant leadership in the right way. Maybe employee performance, they've only looked at productivity. Maybe they haven't looked at other measures of employee performance like presenteeism. Short answer is, I don't know, and probably you won't know until you finish the literature review. So you need to do this literature review, go broad, because by going broad, it's going to help you spot the gaps, what's missing in the field, where are these lacunae in our knowledge. So once you get this is going to help you define your research methodology, and I think it's a little bit premature to think about what that's going to be. Now, in this, when you think about mediating, moderating variables, sometimes I find students get a little bit confused about what these are. If we think very simply, you have servant leadership, and that is then linked to employee performance in some way. So you believe that there is a relationship here, that maybe servant leadership is going to improve employee performance. But then maybe you would find, well, I think servant leadership maybe doesn't really matter for a tech company where, I don't know, maybe there are many layers and the servant leadership, the manager doesn't have any contact with the employees. I don't know, I'm just imagining. Or maybe a factory, right? So maybe you think that the type of industry is going to change the nature of this relationship. That servant leadership is especially good in some industries for employee performance, but really doesn't matter in others, depending on the type of industry or the structure of the organization. That is what is called a moderating variable. Instead, if you're looking at a mediating variable, this is kind of the pathway or the mechanism. So servant leadership maybe says it boosts morale. So boosts morale. And so servant leadership, I see, I don't know, my manager is helping me out. It's really on my team. I feel more inspired. I'm going to be more productive. That, instead, is a mediating variable. What I think you should be thinking about in your review is, instead of getting lost about all these, summarize them. Say, okay, well, maybe, what are all the mediating variables that have been found? And that will help you, when you get your research methodology, to understand the logic, the reasons why these relationships, why if you see a relationship, a correlation between these two things, why that is. And I would also summarize in your review the moderating variables. So that's something you would probably set up your review looking for papers that studied the impact of servant leadership on employee performance. And then you would pull out and start summarizing and analyzing that literature into these two buckets. So I hope that helps clarify. Thank you for sharing that. I think it was overall a very good question. And I'm just going to make sure I share my screen to make sure that you've got this fully. Again, I'm going to show it one more time. And I don't know if you can see my screen share. Guys, it looks like something has happened and it's not sharing my screen very effectively anymore, which is very frustrating. This has happened to me before when I turned off shared screen. Okay, here we go. Here we go, guys. So here's kind of the picture of the whiteboard. So what I was saying here before, just to summarize again, I don't know if you caught this because of technical glitches, but basically you have this funnel and you go a little bit wide, and by the end of it, you want to spit out these gaps, the low-hanging fruit, and this will help you define your research methodology. Here, you have got a link between servant leadership and employee performance. A moderating variable would be the one I'm talking about. This kind of helps to visualize the logic, the type of industry. And a mediating variable would be one like this, boosts morale. You might want to pause the video, go back over this figure a little bit to understand what's going on. This is the kind of classic literature review funnel. And by the end of it, you're going to come to what you're looking for. And this is kind of a causal logic diagram. We're going to come back to more examples of that later. But yeah, hope that helps. I'm going to say, okay, excellent. Hey, Neha, really good to have you join us. And yeah, go check out the replay on this. And you'll be able to get all your questions answered there. All right, we got our next video question submission. And guys, by the way, if you want to get video feedback on your research, check out the link here and submit your video question to us. Again, this is just a great way for you to get support that you need right now to get you unstuck and get clarity on things that might be confusing. I know a lot of students will tell me sometimes they really want to put their best foot forward to their professor. They don't want to ask something that makes them seem dumb. But if you're going in circles and feeling lost, well, that's not great. You need to find somewhere where you can get support and steady feedback, because you're going to encounter so many things along this journey that you don't know how to do. And suffering, why lose time? Ask us questions. We're here to help exactly for that. So, guys, if you do want to participate directly, that's great. Submit your video question or just take advantage of the learning that you can get from our others. And we're very grateful to Neha and Divraj for sharing their questions with us here. So, okay, we're going to pull up Divraj. So Divraj is back, and let's hear how Divraj has been doing since our last set of recommendations on his systematic review.
Hello, Professor Stuckler. It's nice to see you again for your next live session, and greetings to Professor Maki also. As per your last recommendation, I was able to narrow down my studies from 26,000 studies to 138. And instead of focusing on only one disease, I chose to focus on only one data modality. That is, I still studied Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, and neonatal seizures, but instead of focusing on using multimodal data, that is MRI, fMRIs, EEG, I focused on using EEG data only.
Okay, so by way of background, some of you may not know Divraj. Divraj is doing a systematic review on AI diagnostics applied to EEG data, looking at several health outcomes, neonatal mortality, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's, if I remember correctly. And I had suggested these were strange bedfellows, reduce the number of outcomes, because that can be quite challenging to publish. Much of medical journals is organized into these buckets. Here's the cardiovascular papers, here's the diabetes papers, here's the Alzheimer's papers. The alternative route was to organize it and go for a more AI-oriented journal and organize it around the AI tool applied to many different diseases. But if you had too many AI tools and you had too many diseases, you were just going to fall through the cracks. I had a slight preference for the disease-specific organizing, but this way that Divraj has gone with works too. So let's continue.
Because for neonatal seizures, it is the golden standard. EEG data is the golden standard to diagnose neonatal seizures. And concerning Parkinson's disease, it is basically a clinical diagnosis as and for Alzheimer's disease, it is also a clinical diagnosis. But there are certain imaging studies that are used, like MRIs, fMRIs, for these two diseases, but they are very expensive and most patients are diagnosed clinically. So for this live session, I have submitted my first draft of the review.
So that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, again, we got the papers down from 26,000 to 138. If you were reviewing 20, I mean, guys, if you run into this, you got 26,000 papers to review, you need to change something. You cannot humanly get through all that. So got to a much more manageable amount, and it looks like you've sent your paper.
Systematic
We'll take a
review
look at
paper,
that.
and I would like your opinion on that. I feel like there's something missing from the paper. I cannot quite figure out what is missing from the paper, and I think I should have it verified before submitting to a journal for review. And I'm having some difficulties finding the right format uh, for submission also. And thirdly, I plan to submit the systematic review in a journal called AI in Medicine, right? And I want to know how can I maximize my chances of publication and decrease the chances of having to review the paper again or revise the paper again.
All right, excellent. So, all right, so you've sent us the paper. You feel like something is missing. You have a journal in mind, AI in medicine, but you were confused about the format. Well, because you have an idea of the target journal in mind, we can go figure out what the format is. So we'll go look at that, and we'll go look at the manuscript. Some of you, if you want some guidance on publishing tips in our guide section of the Facebook group or on my systematic review playlist in YouTube, you can find that on my channel. In the latter videos, you are going to find our guide for identifying the journal that's the right fit for you. And I recommend finding 3 to 5 journals at this stage because simply if you are the statistical average, you will get rejected. And it's not to be negative or have a deficit mentality. That's just the statistical reality. So that way you can you just let it kind of bounce off your skin like a snowflake if you get rejected and move on to the next journal. So let's take a look at this formatting. Divraj, thanks for sharing this with us, and we'll take a quick look at your paper. But first, I do think at this point, if you've got a full manuscript, we want to be targeting a journal in mind, and let's go pull that up and see what we can figure out about what formatting needs you're going to have. So here we go. I'm coming back over to my browser, and let's go find your journal. So we've got AI applications in medicine, looks like you said. Artificial intelligence in medicine. I can't remember the journal. Let me see if I can get that. Hang on a second. I think it was artificial intelligence in medicine. Here we go. It must be this one. All right. So one thing you want to check to make sure this is a good fit is we can search in this journal. Let's see some systematic reviews that they've recently published. Make sure that they're open to this format, and they are. You can see they're publishing lots of systematic reviews. That's great. And let's find one that's kind of similar to yours in the journal. And this is, again, an approach of our nearest neighbor method to find something similar to what you're trying to do and model off that instead of reinventing the wheel. And I like this. I like this target journal because you can see here, just in the past few months, just lots of systematic reviews. Stuff on medical imaging, stuff on diagnostic prediction. So that's really nice. And here's one on melanoma detection. This one looks predictive from predictive analytics. Lots of stuff. Here's one already on deep learning, machine learning, predicting Alzheimer's disease. So you're probably going to need to cite this. So I would be pulling up these kinds of papers to model off of. This looks like it's pretty close to yours. And this is imagery, systematic review. You're not doing a meta-analysis. So I think maybe the second one on Alzheimer's would be a good one to model off of. And here we go. You can already see the format. You can go to the journal, and when you go to submit your manuscript, it will tell you also about the format. But you can see here how the abstract needs to be structured for this journal: background, objectives, methods, things like this. And if you don't get this right, suppose you send your abstract, it says background, methods, results, or discussion. The editor is going to look at it and say, well, why are you submitting to my journal? You submitted it to the wrong place, and just reject it. So, it'd be a real shame after you've done all this hard work to make those kinds of rookie errors at this stage and not get the full consideration that you're due. This is nice. I think you've got probably will have a good methods. We followed our approaches, so you'll knock this out of the park. And you can see here kind of the payoff and the conclusion. When you say something's missing, if you have a clear conclusion with a clear payoff, what you found, what you can say that's powerful, you should be able to have that come out here. So I'm not sure what's missing, but I imagine that might be it. The kind of so what's the big point? And here it is making a clear point that the combination approach was preferred, and it told us which kind of ranking, what had the highest accuracies. So those are two kind of big findings that are already there. Now, you can see this paper also in its introduction, because it's just about Alzheimer's, starts straight with Alzheimer's. And it comes here and gets to what a gap in the literature review is, in that it's comparing different kinds of methods that have evolved over the years. And so let's take a look at yours and see how you've approached it. I don't think you're going to be able to start in the way this one did with just focusing on the disease, because you have multiple diseases. You're going to have to focus on the EEG and the method that you're looking at, because that's kind of the common thread to all the different outcomes. So I hope this makes sense. I strongly recommend you check out this paper and use this as a model. I won't be able to go through the whole paper in the short time, but we can go in more depth later potentially. So let me stop sharing this, and I'm going to pull up your paper now. And guys, by the way, in the chat, if you have any questions, do let me know. And then we're going to turn after this to our training on finding the right design. And you'll see that many of the points that I'm making now will start coming back into play. All right, so I've got Divraj's paper here, and just bear with me. I'm sharing my screen again, and let's go here. Okay, hopefully you guys can see this. Now, already can tell you the title. You can see the title is already clunky compared with the other title, and this is a feature of having the multiple diseases in here. So this title, I strongly recommend. Oops, and I can see by maximizing it, I just seem to have lost the screen share. So sorry about that, guys. Let me share that again. Let's do the window. Okay. Hopefully you guys can still see this. Let me just look. Okay. And I'm going to try to, I just worry if I make this too big that somehow you're going to lose it. But there we go. Okay. And I'm going to zoom in. So yeah, this title here is clunky. And this comparison of healthy controls isn't really necessary. That's usually after the colon, you would put what the study is. So I would tweak this around and say that like how so what's the big question? Your question was about the EI signals. It's something like applying AI to EEG signals to diagnose seizure related diseases. Something like this. You need to put them all together, or why that matters, and say a systematic review of whatever it is, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and I kind of listed here neonatal seizures. If they're all about seizures, some have diseases, seizures, so maybe you need that common thread of why you put all these diseases together. And I would maybe stick that here. And you've kind of got this here. Yeah, again, I still think these are strange bedfellows. The other thing I can already see, you need to, you see here, actually, we've got this, your background, methods, results, conclusions. This is not for the journal. So it breaks in between pages. You need your word count here. Lots of dotting I's and crossing T's steps here at the very end. I think this is good to evaluate the performance. So we need to make sure you deliver on the performance. And you can see how in the other paper that we scoped, they were actually a little more precise here and saying what was the best model. And yours is kind of complicated because it's, well, best for different diseases. And I guess what's complicated here is you might want to say, well, what was the best for neonatal seizures, and give us some texture of the results there. This is a little bit hard to follow and read. Usually you would put this the other study, maybe you put that up in your methods to get your final sample. You've got a lot of acronyms in here as looking at this cold, and it just gets very hard for them to read. You could put that in the main text, but you're making life really challenging for them. So I want to make sure you big payoff here, just saying AI models show promise in diagnosis. Like you can go further than that, be even bolder. I also want to see you have these 138 studies. Well, how many of these were Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and neonatal seizures? I think you need to bring together what the common thread is in EEG. So it's not just AI is showing promise. You need to get EEG a little bit more front and center. Maybe what the gap is. Maybe it's unclear if AI can integrate well with EEG data. That it's not really clear what the question is there. So set that up. And then, like I was saying here, I think you need to get straight to the point of these are some of the, maybe you want to put these together to say these are well established in the field as some of the most complicated to diagnose. And I don't think you go in that traditional way of this here, of paragraphs on each disease. I like the way you've done the paragraph. You followed our peer system nicely, each paragraph making one big point and talking about this, but that's not really the peg you're hanging this on. You need to get faster to the EEG, that the EEG is the main tool for diagnosing these very complicated conditions, and now there's this new generation of AI-based approaches, and you need to get somewhere to say, yeah, what the gaps are here. And so you're saying here that there's a variation in model performance. Exactly. So you kind of want to use a systematic review. There hasn't been a systematic review to say what is the best, and whatever kind of diagnostics you're going to use. Maybe that's receiver operating curve or other ways to discriminate among them. So yeah, there's still some things to go here. Again, to format your manuscript, you don't want these tables and figures in the middle of the manuscript. Sure that these reports are the main findings are really coming out at the top, because that's going to really help. I think one of the challenges a lot of students have is figuring out there's so many details. What is the most important detail I need to pack in? And you could really lose the forest through the trees. After you've come so far down this journey, that's where, again, that feedback is really helpful. And sometimes the feedback can be really valuable for people who are not embedded in your field, but intelligent non-experts, to make sure that things are very clear to them. Because as you get very specialized, your reviewers may not be those very specific people who have worked, in this case, on AI and EEG. You might get a reviewer who just does stuff on Alzheimer's, and they might not even know anything about AI. So you need to make sure, especially these interdisciplinary papers, that they're written in a very accessible way that everybody can get in a simple way what's so important and why you're having this conversation now. A couple questions here related to that. Akrak asks, is it necessary to cite papers from the same journal to improve your chances of acceptance? It's not necessary, but it definitely shows, I think it more improves the chance of your paper being sent for review, because it shows the editors, hey, this journal is having a conversation about this topic, that we are publishing in this space, we're active in this space, that your paper is going to be a good fit. So that's why I do think that it's a good objective sign that we've seen that Divraj has chosen a good journal to initially target. All right, guys. With that, without further ado, we are going to go through today's mini training on finding the right design, and then we're going to conclude with some other questions from our comments in the Facebook group. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen. Bear with me for a second. I'm going to pull this up again, and I'm really hoping this is going to work, because you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to try this in a different way. I'm going to share my entire screen, and let's see, come up here and here. All right, guys, I'm going to just double check on my phone that you guys can all see this. So one moment, go to the channel, okay. All right, so this looks like it's working. Looks like it's working, and I can see on my phone now your comments. So somebody bark at me if you can't see my screen. All right, finding the right design. This is like the challenge that Neha, for example, is going to be facing at the end of her literature review, and it really is the main challenge that you have as a PhD student, postdoc, or even professor doing your research is to connect your research with the right methodological approach that can break ground. But of course, it's not that simple. And there's some considerations, because maybe the objectively best design to answer the research question is not going to be the best design to meet your goals and to help you get to where you want to go. And so there are some important trade-offs in design. Different designs have different strengths, and sometimes it's really helpful to make an informed decision about those, to know, again, which limitations can you live with, which strengths are absolutely indispensable. And so I want to give you kind of my guide for how you can navigate this complexity. And I think probably the first thing, and this really applies to PhD students, is the fit. And that fit has two things. You need fit with your supervisor, and you need fit with your capabilities. Let me expand. So suppose your supervisor is an expert. I have one student who's working with a supervisor who's an expert in applying a foresight emergence model. It's a type of model in management, and applying that to case studies specifically. Well, if you then say you want to, I don't know, do an experiment and look at a complexity theory model, right? You are starting to create and introduce some frictions with your supervisor, because you're not really tapping their best expertise. And not only that, they're going to be inherently just a little bit less interested in what you're doing the farther you are away from what they do. So ideally, for you to have the smoothest and easiest ride, you almost always will need to have your supervisor be happy. And I find a common thread. So many students come to me and they're having problems with their supervisor. And almost always, I'd say at least more than 90% of the time, their research design, and with it often their topic, is far afield from what their supervisor does. So pragmatically, I strongly recommend you try to optimize your fit with your supervisor. Some of you say, well, I can't change my supervisor. My supervisor doesn't fit. Well, then you need to try to compensate somehow because you are in for a tougher ride than if you had a good fit in the first place. So fit with supervisor. I strongly recommend if your supervisor, right, they're a professor, they're there for a reason, they are good at something. It is better if you are doing something that relates to their knowledge and expertise so that they can properly guide you. And people tend to be very negative in general. It's a human reaction about things they don't understand. So if they don't understand what you're doing, it's just you are setting yourself up for a tough ride. I have a student who just got through a management PhD, had a very tough time with his supervisor because he was wanting to do some innovative stuff on AI, and the supervisor just didn't understand AI. Couldn't place it. Didn't know if it was good. Didn't know if it was bad, and just on the whole was negative. Was negative until he actually went ahead and published papers, got that kind of objective feedback from the field that things were going well, and that assuaged her concerns. But she just didn't have the ability to supervise that project. Okay, so fit with your supervisor. Take a realistic look at your situation and evaluate for yourself. Do you have a fit with your supervisor? All right. Second, fit with your capabilities. And this is not to say, well, you're not able. It's more sometimes, are you capable? So then that capability has some different dimensions to it, right? You have time constraints, and you can't go do maybe a longitudinal study of people that where you follow them for 10 years because you only got 2 years. So for me, I sometimes tell a story. I thought I was going to go learn Russian and go through some Russian data sets, and that I completely underestimated the difficulty of learning Russian. It happens. Be realistic about your capabilities. If you have to go learn new methods, you need to be able to acquire those quickly. So I have a lot of students who are fascinated by data science. They want to invest in learning deep learning algorithms, machine learning. That's not a simple skill to acquire. So you need to make sure you've got the time to acquire that. You've also got somebody who can show you how, because somebody showing you how is the fastest way to learn. At this point, you're probably not taking a lot of courses to boost your skills. So I want you to really here focus on your time and know-how. The second part of this is to also focus on the ethics, because for many studies, if you're going to go collect data, you need to make sure your university can approve that, and that can really slow you down going through ethical review processes. So I've got a student working on autism, wanting to interview autistic children, and it took a long time to get through ethics review. I've got another student who wanted to go do some work in Lebanon. Well, war happens, and hard to get approval for safety concerns to go do that study of refugees in Lebanon that the student wanted to do. So you need to just make sure you are not setting yourself up for failure when choosing the design that you want to do for your study. All right. So assuming you got a great fit with your supervisor, you've got something you know how to do, your supervisor loves it, is excited about the design, and can kind of guide and coach on that design, we still aren't there. We need to make sure that your design is speaking to a gap in the field. And so this gap is incredibly important, because this gap is really setting out what your contribution is. You're doing all this work, and what value is it going to add? And your design is a big part of that conversation, because your design, when you implement and execute it, it's going to give you a result. It's going to give you an outcome. It's going to give you a finding that you're hoping is going to be something that the field is going to find worthy of reading and publishing. And so the kind of design that will be publishable and add value, your goal may not be to publish, it may just be to finish, that's okay too, depends on the evolution of your field and its maturity. So let me kind of draw a map of what I mean. So you can imagine a field, like at the very beginning of a field, there aren't any papers, there's something completely new, it's kind of embryonic. And as you go on, that field might publish lots of papers, lots of things coming out, it starts very, very dense. And there's tons of papers. It's a crowded space. So imagine if you fill a room with people who work in your field or work on that topic. Embryonic, you might even be the only person in the room. Whereas dense, you're kind of bumping shoulders with everybody. It's crowded, you're suffocating, there's no oxygen. All right, well, there's a different degree of innovation that you need in this trajectory. So at the very field, you're introducing the field, you're kind of the only one in the room. You might be setting out a hypothesis for the first time, conjecturing. You might just present, hey, isn't this interesting? Here's some new data. Here's a new idea. Here's a new fact to think about. You don't need a whole lot of innovation necessarily to do that, to throw something out. It can be purely even be speculative. That's at the very beginning. At the very other end of the curve, dense, thousands of papers. Let's come back, say, right, to the servant leadership example. All right, so say hypothesis generating, somebody says, I think servant leadership could really have a powerful impact on employee performance. And nobody's ever looked at that before. And so just introducing it, generating the hypothesis works. But now, flash forward, say, thousands of articles looking at the impact of servant leadership on employee performance. They've looked at it in India and China. They've looked at it over 10 years or 2 years. They've looked at it with different measures, all the measures of performance. They've done it with randomized trials. They've done it with correlation studies. They've done everything. It gets very, very hard in that room that's so crowded to get oxygen for your ideas. You have to do something. It's harder to make a contribution in that space. So it might be you have to really demonstrate causality in a convincing way. You might have to do an experiment that breaks ground, something that's held everybody else back methodologically from contributing to this space. So I hope this makes sense, that it makes sense in a way to calibrate your design to where you're at. You know, if your field's very dense and you just try to introduce hypothesize the field, that's going to be flat on arrival. Whereas if you're the only person in the room and I see this other mistake, somebody's doing something brand new, super convincing proof, but they're not really having a conversation because the field isn't there, that's another kind of problem in setting up your design to fill a gap. Typically what I recommend is to do a literature review. And to do a literature review, you need a few papers already in your field. And that's where the systematic review comes in quite nicely. I think that literature review, systematic review, usually we like people to have about 20 to 30 papers that they can review in their final set. It gives you kind of a healthy overview of where the field is heading, what's the low-hanging fruit, what are some good gaps to go forward. Just everybody's got to do a review. Like I said before, do it systematically. At the upper end of this, your review becomes an umbrella review. There's maybe 1, 2, 3, 10 systematic reviews already done, and you're doing an umbrella review, which is a review of systematic reviews. Right? So really a really healthy kind of space here is your field is already getting established. You're not the only person in the room, but you still have room to breathe, and start it with a systematic review is what I like. So coming back to the design question, you need to know in this space what your value added is going to be. And that is in part based on the evolution of and its maturity. You need to ask yourself if you've done a literature review already. I personally don't think you have any business deciding on the right design for yourself until you've done a literature review. Now, again, this may be forced upon you. Your supervisor says, hey, if they have funding, you have to do this design. Well, okay, then don't worry about it. But in other cases, you do have real choices to make here about what design you're going to use. And part of that design might be, are you doing something that's very descriptive? If you're doing something very descriptive, it tends to be earlier in the field's development. If you're doing something that has to be more causal, it might be kind of more mature in the field's development. There are also some field-specific considerations. Some fields like economics just prioritize heavily causal design no matter what for the top journals. So this is also going to depend in part on your field. Some fields are going to be, they're just all ethnography, and you try to do a quantitative study for those fields, then, well, it's going to fall flat. So you do need to understand if you're going to be doing more descriptive causal research, If you're going to use existing data or you're going to collect new data, I often have a preference to use existing data where possible, especially at the PhD level, just because of time constraints. And there's more to say here, but these are some of the guides to finding the right design. The last thing that you really need is to have clarity then. If you know what your gap is going to be, you need clarity on how everything fits together. And usually that how everything fits together in your research space, we set out with a logic model or a DAG, directed acyclic graph. It's just really outlining the logic of your study. I was giving you an example of this earlier with Neha, but let me show you what I mean. So in a DAG, you really need to explain how your variable of interest is linked to your outcome of interest. Right? That's kind of the core of most research. We're looking at the effect of something on something else, or how these two things relate. In general, I like research. Research is always so complicated that has a direction. Instead of saying, I'm just exploring this relationship, I like to at least start with a starting idea. I think this thing here, I think inequality is going to make our crime worse, right? Instead of saying, I'm going to just explore the relationship between inequality and crime. And you can start adding layers. There are things that can muddy the waters, like confounding variables, or other ways tools that can help you to parse out these relationships. Instrumental variables. This gets us down a more causal logic path, but it's just to show you that this is kind of the most basic framework of understanding things. And on these graphs, you can put mediating and moderating variables like we talked about earlier. So let me show you a practical example from a student I've been working with who was trying to look at how smoking outcome expectancies, kind of your perception of how smoking was going to affect your life, could lead to e-cigarette dependence. And tried to kind of embed that in a psychological framework. But it's just this example of the study, you need to be able to kind of encapsulate what you're going to do in your design into some kind of causal logic. Even if you're doing this descriptively, I want you to have that crystal clear clarity on what you're trying to show. Like what the payoff from your study is going to be, and what your design is going to deliver at the end of that. And if you don't have this DAG clearly set out, it's very easy for you to get lost and confused. It becomes even harder to set up an effective design that's going to deliver the kind of outcome and result that you might want. Again, if you set up your design, you don't know exactly what you're going to get. Otherwise, it wouldn't be research. But it will definitely make it more likely you're going to get the type of thing that you're interested in. All right. So that's it. That's our quick guide to design. We've got some time for some questions, and I'm going to go through and cover our questions this week from the Facebook group. But let me turn back to you guys if you have any questions on your design. And I'm going to take some other questions here. I see some from Awanish Kumar. I'm going to take that, and others from you here in the community. And so while I'm sifting through these coming in the chat, I'm just going to say, Awanish, yeah, so how to choose research topics. That's linked to the conversation we've been having. We use what I call a convergence method. Really want to optimize your passion, something that's feasible, and something where there's a debate. So again, going back to the field maturity we were talking about a moment ago, I don't want you to be the only person in the room for your research topic. I think it's just too high risk. Maybe something you can do when you're a full professor like me, but at the very beginning it's very hard. It's very hard to convince other people that it's important, and you're just not the right messenger for that. Again, I don't want you to do something that's too dense, because then it's going to be very hard for you to make a contribution as well. So make sure you're passionate about it, because it's going to be a long, hard slog. And make sure you've got the tools and resources that you can actually do the research. And like we were talking about today, make sure on the feasibility side there's that fit with your supervisor. Thanks for asking that. The other thing Awanisha asked is it ethical to use AI? And there's a right and a wrong way to use AI. And our philosophy on this is to use AI to tap the power of things that machines can do better, and while preserving the things that humans add uniquely. So the original thinking around your topic needs to come from you. The first draft of your writing needs to come from you. But you can use tools like ChatGPT as a sounding board. You can use tools like SciSpace, which I just reviewed. If you look at the most recent post at the time of this video on the YouTube channel, SciSpace, it can really sift through hundreds of papers and extract information out forensically that you going through with a scalpel would take you days, if not potentially weeks. So the original thinking, the original creativity, the original drafting, that's yours. But you can use AI as a sounding board for feedback and as a check on your work. That's our model. Hope that makes sense. All right, guys. I'm actually gonna share the. I'm gonna share the screen and go through questions in the Facebook group here in a second. And I know we got a lot of interest on AI. Bubakar is asking, can you use ChatGPT to conduct thematic analysis? I want you to identify the themes first. You could dump all the data in ChatGPT and say, hey, what themes are you seeing? But I would rather you identify themes and say, hey, ChatGPT, here's the data. Here are the initial themes I've seen. Do you agree with these themes? Or can you update these? Can you identify additional themes that maybe I haven't spotted? And that's a better way, in my view, to use ChatGPT. So I wouldn't think of, because otherwise ChatGPT is becoming you. It's doing the research. It's interpreting the data. So that may seem subtle, but I want you to take that first pass and then use ChatGPT as a check. Is using a call for papers a good way to select a topic? Well, it's good in the sense that it shows, I mentioned before, that convergence method, it shows that there's a debate. It shows that journals are interested in it. Now, you still have to satisfy the other dimensions of feasibility. Can you still do it? I had a student who wanted to join a call for papers, but she just couldn't fit that call for papers with what they were looking for. They wanted a certain kind of design that the theme was right on AI and management, but she couldn't get the kind of design they were looking for in time for the deadline. So check the feasibility and make sure you're passionate about it. I do see sometimes students say, oh, great opportunity here, call for papers, and they kind of pigeonhole their energy into it, and it's not really what they're passionate about. They're kind of tying themselves in knots and getting lopsided trying to fit with this call for papers. I mean, if you do good research, so the advantage of a call for papers is it can sometimes be easier to get in a little bit. So maybe instead of acceptance being 10%, it may be 20 or 30%, especially if you know the people behind the issue. But if you've done a good paper, you're going to be able to shop around to journals and pick and have a little more choice of where you want it to go. So I hope that helps. Akra give you a little bit of a guide there. Let me share here, and I'm gonna try to get into the Facebook group because I think this is potentially a nice way for you guys to see what where you can also post your questions. So let me come back in here, and you're gonna get my kind of owner view. All right, I hope you can see the screen. Okay, screen is sharing. That's good. And let's go to the Facebook group. So guys, join the group if you haven't already. And we have also, I just want to share with you, we have different chats here. We have an academic writing support chat that's available to you. And I don't know if this is opening up now. Here we go. Where people ask questions and you get answers not just from me, but from people in the community. There really is nothing else quite like this out there. And we're providing the support that other people would want to do a lot of money for. And then here, we've got some questions here, and we had several really, really interesting questions here, and this is what I want to kind of come to. So Rosie here, I hope you can see this. Rosie asks, wait a second, I'm just seeing, I still got this up, so, okay. All right, I hope you guys can still see this. Rosie asks, for review papers, how much research is enough? If I find 300 plus papers on the topic, is it necessary to review all 300, or is review 150 enough? And is timing an issue? Does that play into it all? Well, if you're doing a systematic review, yes, you need to screen all the papers. And usually that first screening is you're going to kick a lot of them out because they're not going to meet your inclusion exclusion criteria. So here, if you've got a whole bunch of papers, the best way to do this is to set some clear inclusion exclusion criteria to narrow it down. So what if you say, okay, I only want to look at the randomized controlled trials? Well, in that case, you might have your 300 plus papers and you can sub-filter it for the randomized controlled trials, and now you got 10. So being smart about your inclusion exclusion criteria will prevent you from getting lost in over of too many papers. Here, Christian asks, hope that helps, Rosie. Thanks for sharing that. What's the best orderly way to write the rationale of the study? Well, to write the rationale, you need to know your gap. And once you know your gap, it kind of follows. Here's what's missing in the field, and here's what I did to plug that gap. So if you're confused about your gap, you're going to be confused about writing the rationale. We've got a great training in the Facebook group. If you go to guide number 12 on finding your gap, and we actually give you different methods and techniques for finding your gap that you can do right away, that's going to help you. Then we also have a guide on writing the introduction of the study. So yeah, Christian Touch and the assistant in the group, Marina, can link you up to that if helpful. Abubakar asks, what's the difference between research and review papers? So review papers are just reviewing research done. In some cases, the review paper can be a research paper in that they're treating each research paper as a piece of data and analyzing them. And the most advanced version of this is called meta-analysis, where you might even create a database from the research papers. Could be based on what the articles found, what the author's institutions were, and these all become kind of coded as a data set. So usually the research is going to be the paper that's going to produce original data or evidence, and the review is then reviewing all of those. But the review paper can be research itself if it then produces original evidence from the way that it's evaluating or analyzing these research papers. I hope that makes sense. This is why I do like systematic review papers, because they do fall into that more data-oriented approach. That's why they're easier to publish, because they're treating the research as data and seeing things and spotting patterns and themes in the research papers that you can't see otherwise in a more conventional literature review. So that makes the systematic review papers easier to publish, because they are treated and they are considered in many ways more like research. Okay, Erica asks, we got a couple more here, and then I'll come back to your questions and we'll wrap up, stay on time. Erica asks, we're funding the search process for literature reviews to avoid type 1, type 2 errors. If you don't know what type 1, type 2 errors are, check out our systematic review playlist, which will go through this. And we have a type 2 error test, which will help you. This is when you found that you're missing a paper in your search and it needs to be included, and you have to figure out why you're missing it. Either it's not the database or you missed a keyword, but you need to know which so you can figure out how to cope with it. And type 1 is when you're getting lots of gobbledygook in your search that you don't actually want. This is only really ends up being a problem if you have way too many papers to deal with. Because there's sometimes a tension between the type 1 and type 2 errors. But Erica, yeah, definitely go watch our systematic review playlist. That's going to help. For other sources for scoping reviews, gray literature, this is just make sure on these that you have very tight inclusion area, because this can blow up. There's not really kind of a structured way to search this very easily. Sometimes it depends on your topic. So I had a student working on the International Monetary Fund, and so they looked at published papers, but they also searched the International Monetary Fund's reports because those fit. So there aren't really good databases for gray literature. That's the point. They're gray literature. They're not in these big databases. So you need a separate search strategy for those. Guys, I hope you can see. If you want to participate and get these answers, we're answering. Our community's answering in the group here. Don't sit there in silence and struggle and not get help. Participate. It's that's why the group is here. So Bambas ML asks, in a systematic review, should your references only be limited to your data, or can you cite and reference from papers not in your data, like in your introduction? And yeah, 100%. You definitely want to cite more widely in your introduction and discussion, and possibly even your methods. But when it comes to the set of papers that you're analyzing, you only really want to stick to in that results part the papers that you pulled in. That's your data set, so to speak. So, but absolutely, definitely, you will most likely be citing other papers in your introduction that are not in your review per se. Okay, we've got more. How to begin? I recommend a literature review, especially a systematic one. Chi asks here, I understand that part focusing on the research questions say the impact of drug A on B, but don't we need to do in the intro all this other? Look, you shouldn't really be doing an intro until the very end. It's just a recipe for getting lost and feeling frustrated. So I always recommend start with the methods. Get clarity on what you're trying to do, then you can work on the framing later. Now, this should also be clear. If you've already done your literature, you'll have that kind of clarity, and you won't run into these headaches. So, Chi, I recommend you do a literature review. If you haven't already, if you have, don't get bogged down in writing the introduction. It's kind of like, when you and then you're trying to figure out what bow to put on top. Well, you got to have the present first, and you got to figure out what wrapping paper, and then at the very end, you can put that bow on top to tie everything together beautifully. But don't sweat too much over that just yet. It's just a recipe for frustration. All right, guys, that is our show for today. I see several of you are saying you want to see more sessions like this. Yeah, let me know what you'd like for us to cover. Submit your work. If you want to take directly part, submit your video question with the link here. I always just want to make sure that you guys aren't feeling stuck. So, we'll take lots of things on. I think there's a lot of appetite for more on AI. So we might do a deep dive in a paper and show how to use AI. Short answer here is don't do this with ChatGPT. But if you want to make sense of your cluttered thoughts, you can do that. But I wouldn't take that cluttered thoughts and then have ChatGPT drafting a journal paper for you. That's problematic, and you're probably going to get something that's going to be difficult to publish anyway. So yeah, I'm seeing there's a lot of hunger from you guys for more on using ChatGPT and AI, so that will probably be one of our next sessions coming up. If you do have something you want to see, reach out to me in the Facebook group on the DMs, and I will look forward to seeing all of you at our next